I'll never forget the morning it all started. The sound of voices outside my kitchen window pulled me away from my coffee. At first, I thought it was just kids walking to school. But when I stepped onto my back porch, mug in hand, I froze. Two men in neon safety vests were standing in my backyard. Not near the edge of it, in it. One was driving stakes into the ground, the other unrolling a long orange cord to mark what looked suspiciously like a path. "Excuse me," I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was already pounding. "What exactly are you doing in my yard?" The taller of the two men looked up, almost annoyed that I'd interrupted him. "Sidewalk extension," he said flatly. "We've got orders from the HOA to start laying foundation here." My stomach dropped. "Sidewalk? This is private property. You can't just—" But before I could finish, the man shrugged. "Take it up with your board, sir. We just follow instructions." He went right back to hammering the stakes. I stood there, coffee shaking in my hand, unable to process what I was seeing. Our backyard wasn't huge, but it was ours. My wife Emily loved gardening along the fence line, and we had a little wooden swing set where our grandkids played when they visited. And now, out of nowhere, strangers were measuring it out for concrete? Emily came out behind me, her robe tied loosely, hair still messy from sleep. "What's going on?" she asked, squinting at the workers. "They're saying the HOA ordered a sidewalk," I told her, my voice tight with anger. "Through our yard!" Her hand shot to her mouth. No, they can't." That's when the real chill hit me. If they were bold enough to start construction without asking, something bigger was going on. That evening, after the workers packed up, I stormed into the HOA office. It was inside our community clubhouse, the kind of place decorated with motivational posters about neighborhood pride and unity, but the air inside was thick with smugness. Behind the desk sat Ezra Thorne, our HOA president, a man who wore golf polos like armor and spoke with the kind of confidence only power or arrogance could give. "Ezra," I snapped, "why are construction crews in my backyard?" He looked up slowly from his paperwork, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Ah, Mr. Caldwell, good to see you. I assume you're referring to the sidewalk extension project?" "That's not a project. That's theft. You can't just take private land." He leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head. "Actually, we can. The board voted to approve a public easement. It's all perfectly legal." Emily, standing beside me, gasped. "You never told us. You never even asked us." Ezra chuckled, cold and dismissive. "The HOA is here to make decisions in the best interest of the community. Your backyard is, well, underutilized. Connecting the walking path will increase property values across the board. Increasing everyone else's property values by destroying ours?" I shot back. My voice cracked louder than I wanted, but I didn't care. Ezra leaned forward now, lowering his tone like a snake. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's happening with or without your blessing." I felt Emily's hand grip mine, her nails digging into my palm. For the first time in years, I felt truly powerless in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump, thinking about strangers walking just feet from our living room window once that sidewalk was poured. Our backyard would be gone, our privacy gone, everything we'd worked for stripped away by people who claimed they were our neighbors. I kept replaying Ezra's words. It's all perfectly legal. But was it? I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough to smell something rotten. Easements aren't just handed out like candy. They required owner consent, or at least notice, and we'd had none. So the next morning, I called the police. When Officer Ramirez showed up, she walked the property with me, her boots crunching on the grass where the workers had left their orange markings. She scribbled notes in her pad, squinting at the stakes. Looks like they were serious, she muttered. They're trespassing, right? This is private property, I pressed. Ramirez looked at me carefully. Yes, but if your HOA filed an easement, it gets complicated. Easements are civil matters. We don't usually enforce them unless there's criminal damage or fraud involved. Emily's voice shook as she asked, So what do we do? Just let them take it? The officer sighed. I'll file a report about unauthorized entry for now. That way it's on record. But you're probably looking at a civil suit. Get yourself a lawyer fast. Her words rattled around my skull long after she left. Civil suit, lawyer, fight. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a sidewalk anymore. It was about whether the place we called home still belonged to us. And that's when Emily said something that lit the fire in me. They've stolen enough already. If they think they can steal our backyard too, they don't know who they're dealing with. For the next week, I started gathering everything. Our deed, the neighborhood plat maps, every HOA bylaw I could get my hands on. And the more I read, the angrier I got. Nowhere did it say the board could carve up private property without due process. If they really had filed an easement, they'd done it in secret. But here's the thing. Secrets have a way of rotting from the inside out. And as I was about to discover, this was only the beginning. Because the moment I thought I understood how dirty this fight was going to get, things got even worse. The week after calling the police was a blur of anger, confusion, and late-night research. Emily kept reminding me to eat, but I barely had an appetite. All I could think about was Ezra's smug grin, the way he said, "It's happening, with or without your blessing." No, not on my watch. That Monday, I walked into the office of a local property attorney, Jacob Stein. He was a younger guy, mid-30s, sharp suit, but he had that look in his eyes like he enjoyed a good fight. After I laid out the situation, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "They filed a public easement without your consent?" he asked. "That's what they're claiming," I told him, "but we never saw any paperwork, no notice, nothing." Jacob tapped his pen against his legal pad. "That's not just suspicious, it's potentially unlawful. Easements require either your signature or, in rare cases, a municipal order. An HOA can't just create one out of thin air." Emily leaned forward. "So what do we do?" "You do exactly what Ezra doesn't expect," Jacob said with a small smile. "You fight back. We'll file for an injunction to halt construction until this is sorted in court. In the meantime, I'll request all HOA records related to this so-called vote. If they faked paperwork or pushed this through in secret, we'll find it." For the first time in days, I felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't powerless. But Ezra wasn't going to make it easy. That Friday, the HOA called an emergency board meeting. It wasn't subtle. They wanted the whole neighborhood to see us as troublemakers. When Emily and I walked into the clubhouse, I swear half the community turned to stare. Whispers followed us like shadows. Ezra sat at the front of the room, flanked by his loyal board members. He didn't waste time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and rehearsed, "we're here tonight because of a selfish attempt to block progress. The Caldwell family has filed legal action to prevent the sidewalk extension, a project meant to improve safety and community value for all of us." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A neighbor I barely knew muttered, "Unbelievable," under her breath. My blood boiled. "You didn't tell them the whole truth, Ezra," I said loudly, cutting through the murmurs. "You're trying to take land that doesn't belong to you, without notice, without permission. That's not progress, it's theft." Ezra raised his eyebrows, feigning innocence. "Mr. Caldwell, the board acted within its rights. If you have an issue, take it up in court. Oh, wait, you already have." The room erupted in whispers again, but this time I noticed some neighbors looking uneasy. They weren't all buying his act. Emily stood and spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "We've lived here for 15 years. We've paid dues, followed the rules, been good neighbors, and now we're treated like criminals for protecting what's ours. Ask yourself, if they can take our yard today, whose will it be tomorrow? That line hit home. I saw more heads nodding now. Ezra's smirk faltered, just a little. But then things took a dangerous turn. A man from the back of the room, one of Ezra's loudest supporters, stood up and shouted, "If you don't like it, move! We don't need people like you dragging the community down!" I clenched my fists. "You don't get to tell us to leave our own home." The man started down the aisle toward me, chest puffed, veins bulging in his neck. For a second, I thought he might actually swing. That's when Emily grabbed my arm and whispered, "Don't. He wants you to lose your temper." And then, like fate had been waiting for the cue, 2 uniformed police officers walked in. The room fell silent. "Officers," Ezra said smoothly, "thank you for coming. As you can see, tensions are running high. Perhaps you can remind everyone to keep this civil." But one of the officers, Ramirez, the same one who'd been at my house, looked directly at me. "Mr. Caldwell, we received a complaint earlier today that workers tried to enter your property again. Did you authorize that?" "No," I said firmly, "and I have them on my security camera." A murmur swept the room. Ezra's face darkened. Ramirez turned back to him. "Mr. Thorne, until this is resolved in court, I strongly suggest your crews stay off the Caldwell property. Otherwise, we'll have to consider it trespassing." That was the first time I saw Ezra lose his cool. His jaw clenched, his knuckles tightened on the edge of the podium. He forced a smile, but his voice cracked as he said, "Noted." That night, Emily and I sat on the porch swing in silence. For the first time in weeks, the backyard was quiet. No workers, no noise, just the chirp of crickets. But my mind wouldn't settle. "Do you think we can really win?" Emily asked softly. I stared at the orange stakes still poking out of the grass like scars. "I don't know, but we can't back down now. If we let them take this, they'll know they can take anything." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a patch of grass anymore. This was about standing up to people who thought power made them untouchable. But as I'd soon learn, Ezra wasn't finished playing dirty. And the next move he made, it nearly tore our whole neighborhood apart. I thought Ezra would back off after the police warned him, but I should have known better. Men like him don't admit defeat, they double down. The first shot came in the form of a letter, slid under our front door one Tuesday morning. Thick paper, HOA letterhead, written in Ezra's self-important tone. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell," it began, "due to your continued obstruction of approved community projects, the board has voted to fine you $250 per day until compliance is achieved. Additionally, your failure to maintain harmonious community standards will be noted in your permanent file, which may affect your standing as residents in good faith." I crushed the letter in my fist. Fines for protecting our own property? Emily read it over my shoulder, her hands trembling. "Permanent file? What does that even mean?" "It means he's trying to bleed us dry," I muttered, "and scare us into giving up." Jacob, our lawyer, wasn't surprised when I showed him the letter. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with a dry laugh. "Classic intimidation tactic," he said. "They have no legal right to fine you for refusing to surrender private land. Keep every letter they send. We'll use this against them in court." But Ezra wasn't just fighting us on paper. He was fighting us in the court of public opinion. Within days, flyers started showing up in neighbors' mailboxes. Bold letters screamed, "Are the Caldwells destroying our community?" The text accused us of blocking safety improvements, lowering property values, and causing unnecessary police involvement. There was even a blurry photo of me standing in the yard pointing angrily at the construction workers. Out of context, it looked like I was the aggressor. Emily broke down when she saw it. "He's turning everyone against us," she whispered through tears. I wrapped my arms around her, but inside I was boiling. Let him. The truth will come out. It has to. Still, it hurt to walk down the street and feel eyes on us. Neighbors we'd shared barbecues with for years suddenly avoided us. Some even crossed the street rather than say hello. Ezra had declared war, and he was winning the propaganda battle. A week later, Jacob called with news that made my stomach sink. "He's filed a counterclaim," he told me over the phone. "A counterclaim?" "Yeah, he's alleging that you've been in violation of HOA landscaping rules for years. Claims your fence encroaches on community land and that your backyard was never fully yours to begin with." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's a lie!" Jacob's tone was calm, but I could hear the irritation in his voice. "Of course it is, but he's backed it up with altered plat maps and meeting notes. He's got someone on the board helping him forge records." Emily, listening beside me, gasped. "He's falsifying documents?" "That's what it looks like, but don't panic. Fraud leaves fingerprints. We'll subpoena the originals from the county records. If he altered them, we'll prove it." I wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in. Ezra had power, money, and loyal followers. If he could twist neighbors against us, what else was he capable of? The pressure kept building. One evening, as Emily and I were eating dinner, there was a loud knock on the door. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there. "Mr. Caldwell?" one asked. "We received a report of a disturbance. Your neighbors claim you threatened HOA members at the last meeting." I blinked in shock. "What? That's insane! I never—" Emily appeared behind me. "This is ridiculous. He's trying to set us up." The officers exchanged a glance. "Look, we just have to follow up. Can we take a statement?" I invited them in, showing them the security footage from the meeting, the same one Ezra's cronies had claimed I was violent at. The video showed me standing calmly, speaking firmly, but never once threatening anyone. The officer nodded. "Looks clear to me. We'll file this as unfounded, but Mr. Caldwell—" He hesitated, then added, "Be careful. Someone's trying hard to build a case against you." When they left, Emily collapsed into her chair. "He's not just stealing our yard anymore. He's trying to paint you as a criminal." Her words chilled me to the bone. But the real breaking point came 2 nights later. It was past midnight, the house dark and quiet. I was dozing off when the sound of footsteps outside jolted me awake. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain back just a sliver. My heart stopped. 3 men, dressed in dark hoodies, were in my backyard, yanking up the stakes Ezra's workers had left and planting new ones closer to our house this time. I grabbed my phone, recording through the glass. Emily woke up and whispered, "What's happening?" I whispered back, "Evidence. We're catching them red-handed." Then one of the men looked straight at the house. For a split second, our eyes locked. He smirked. That's when I realized they wanted me to see. This wasn't just construction, it was intimidation. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. "There are trespassers in my yard. They're vandalizing my property." Police arrived within 10 minutes, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the night. The men scattered, disappearing into the darkness before officers could catch them, but my video was clear. Ramirez was there again, jaw tight with frustration. "This is escalating," she muttered. "I'll add this to the report. If Ezra's involved, he's crossing into criminal harassment territory." Emily clutched my arm, whispering, "When will this end?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. Ezra had just made a critical mistake. He thought fear would break us, but fear can do something else too. It can harden you. And if Ezra wanted a war, he just guaranteed he was going to get one. For weeks, Ezra had been playing chess, and we were stuck reacting to every move. But that changed the morning Jacob called. His voice carried a sharp edge of triumph. "Got him," he said. I nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "I went to the county clerk's office yesterday, pulled the original plat maps and easement filings. Ezra's versions don't match. His copies show your fence sitting 2 feet inside community land. The originals?" Jacob chuckled. "Your fence is exactly where it should be.
He forged them! I felt a rush of relief so strong my knees nearly gave out. So we can prove he lied? Not just lied, he said. Committed fraud. That's criminal. This isn't just a civil lawsuit anymore. We can bring in law enforcement. Emily, overhearing, covered her mouth with both hands. Tears welled in her eyes. Finally, he'll pay for what he's done. That afternoon, Jacob arranged a meeting with Officer Ramirez. We sat in the small conference room at the station, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ramirez flipped through the copies of Ezra's maps, her brow furrowed. "This is bad," she muttered. "If your attorney's right, this isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It's falsification of public records. That carries serious penalties." "So what happens next?" I asked. She closed the folder, her expression firm. "We'll open a criminal investigation. I'll need statements from both of you, plus the originals Jacob pulled. If Ezra submitted fake documents to push this sidewalk project, he could be looking at felony charges." Emily squeezed my hand under the table. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we weren't alone. But Ezra didn't get to where he was by being sloppy. That night, as if sensing the walls closing in, he struck back harder than ever. We woke to the sound of pounding on the front door. It was just after 6 a.m., the sun barely up. When I opened it, a sheriff deputy stood there, holding a thick envelope. "Mr. Caldwell?" "Yes?" He handed me the envelope. "You've been served. Temporary restraining order, filed by the HOA." I tore it open, scanning the pages in disbelief. The order claimed I had harassed Ezra and multiple board members, made violent threats, and interfered with community safety projects. It barred me from attending HOA meetings and set a court hearing 2 weeks out. Emily's face drained of color. "He's trying to flip it on us!" I slammed the envelope on the table. "He knows we've got proof, so now he's painting me as the villain before it all comes out." Jacob wasn't surprised when I called him. "Classic defensive play," he said. "He's hoping the restraining order muddies the water, makes you look unstable. Don't take the bait. We'll fight this in court, and when we present the forged documents, his case collapses." But knowing that didn't make it easier. Neighbors saw the deputy at our door. By afternoon, rumors were flying that I had been banned from meetings for aggressive behavior. Ezra's smear campaign was working overtime. That evening, Emily and I sat on the porch, the weight of it all pressing down. "I don't know how much more I can take," she whispered. "Every time we get a win, he finds a way to twist it." I looked out at the backyard, the garden she loved, the swing set, the fence line that had become the battleground for our sanity. We can't stop now. If we do, he wins. And I'll be damned if I let Ezra Thorne bulldoze our life just because he thinks he can. Emily wiped her eyes, nodding. "Then we fight, all the way." And that's when my phone buzzed. A new voicemail, from a blocked number. I pressed play. A deep voice I didn't recognize growled, "Drop the lawsuit, or next time it won't be stakes in your yard, it'll be worse." The message ended with a click. Emily's eyes widened in horror. Was that a threat? My pulse hammered in my ears. This wasn't just about property anymore. Ezra, or someone working for him, had crossed a line. I saved the voicemail and looked at Emily, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. They want us scared, but all they've done is prove how desperate they are. The voicemail changed everything. When I played it for Officer Ramirez the next morning, she didn't hesitate. "That's a criminal threat," she said, jotting notes in her pad. "We'll pull your phone records, trace the call. If this connects to Ezra or anyone on the board, we'll have grounds for arrest." Emily sat beside me, wringing her hands. "So what do we do until then?" Ramirez's eyes softened. "Document everything. Don't engage with him directly. And if anything else happens, anything, you call me. Understand?" We both nodded. Walking out of the station, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. Someone had tried to scare us off, but instead, it lit a fire in me. If Ezra thought he could bully us into silence, he'd picked the wrong family. But the pressure was taking its toll on the neighborhood. By now, everyone knew about the lawsuit, the restraining order, even the police reports. and Ezra was exploiting it. At the next board meeting, one I couldn't attend because of his restraining order, neighbors told me later that Ezra painted us as community pariahs. "The Caldwells are draining our HOA funds with frivolous lawsuits," he told the crowd. "They're inviting police drama, damaging our reputation, and threatening the very safety of our streets." Some people believed him, but others were starting to see cracks in his story. One neighbor, Mrs. Walker, a retired teacher who'd lived here even longer than we had, stood up and asked the question no one dared voice. "If the easement is so legitimate, why are the Caldwells the only ones who never saw it?" Ezra brushed her off with a smile, but I knew he hated being challenged. The divide became visible within days. Some neighbors left notes of support in our mailbox, quiet words like, "Hang in there," or "We know the truth." Others glared at us, muttering under their breath when we walked past. One evening, while Emily tended her roses, a man I'd never seen before stopped on the sidewalk and sneered, "Why don't you people just move? Nobody wants you here." Emily froze, her hands covered in soil. I stepped forward, my voice low but steady. "Keep walking." He smirked and left. But the damage was done. We weren't just fighting Ezra anymore. We were fighting the poison he'd spread. Meanwhile, Jacob pressed forward with the case. He'd filed motions accusing Ezra of fraud, and Ramirez confirmed the sheriff's office had officially opened a criminal investigation. But Ezra wasn't done playing dirty. Late one night, as I sat at the kitchen table reviewing documents, Emily called me to the window. "Look!" Across the street, floodlights blazed over the HOA clubhouse. Trucks lined the parking lot. Workers in reflective vests unloaded stacks of lumber, cement bags, and machinery. "They're starting construction," Emily whispered. My stomach twisted. "They're not waiting for the court ruling, they're forcing it." The next morning, sure enough, the roar of machinery echoed through the neighborhood. Ezra had ordered crews to break ground on the sidewalk through our yard, even with the injunction pending. I ran outside, waving my arms. "You can't do this! There's a court order!" One of the workers shrugged helplessly. "We've got authorization from the HOA." I pulled out my phone, recording everything. "Then your boss can explain it to the police." Within the hour, Ramirez arrived with 2 more officers. They ordered the crew to halt immediately. I'll never forget the look on Ezra's face as he stormed across the grass, red with fury. "This is harassment," he barked. "We have every right to continue." Ramirez stood firm. "Not until the courts decide. If you push this, Mr. Thorne, you'll be in violation of a criminal investigation. Do you understand?" For a moment, Ezra's jaw worked like he might explode, but then he smiled coldly. "Fine, we'll let the courts handle it." He turned to me, his voice dropping low so only I could hear. "But I promise you this, you won't win. I'll bury you before I let you make me look like a fool." That night, Emily and I sat in silence at the kitchen table, the house heavy with tension. She finally broke the quiet. "Do you ever wonder if we should just walk away? Sell the house? Leave this place behind?" Her voice cracked and my heart sank. I reached across the table, taking her hand. "I've thought about it, but if we leave, Ezra wins. And worse, he'll do this to someone else. We can't let him keep stealing pieces of this neighborhood just because no one fights back." Emily nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then we fight, no matter what." And as if by cue, my phone buzzed with a new message. This time it wasn't anonymous. It was from Jacob. He'd uncovered something in Ezra's financial records, something that could blow the whole case wide open. And if it was true, Ezra wasn't just guilty of fraud. He was guilty of something much, much worse.
Jacob's message was short. "We need to meet. Urgent. Tomorrow morning." Sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept turning over what he might have found. Fraud? Hidden deals? Something worse? When Emily and I walked into his office the next day, Jacob was already pacing. A folder sat on his desk, thick with papers. He didn't waste time. "Ezra has been stealing from the HOA," Jacob said flatly. Emily gasped. "What do you mean, stealing?" Jacob pushed the folder toward us. "He's been funneling maintenance funds into shell accounts, landscaping, security, even clubhouse repairs. On paper, it all looks legitimate. But when you follow the money, it's going straight into companies that don't exist, companies he controls." I flipped through the pages, each document darker than the last. Fake invoices, altered budgets, thousands upon thousands of dollars gone. "Why hasn't anyone noticed?" I asked. "They trusted him, and he's clever. He inflates project costs, hides the skimming and complicated reports. Most homeowners don't read past the first page." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "So this isn't just about our yard. It's about the whole neighborhood." Jacob nodded. "Exactly. And with this, the case changes. We're not just talking about a property dispute. We're talking about felony embezzlement." That afternoon, Officer Ramirez came by to collect the files. She whistled under her breath as she scanned them. "This is bigger than we thought. I'll forward this to financial crimes. If they corroborate, Ezra could be looking at years behind bars." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope stirring. Maybe the tide was finally turning. But Ezra wasn't going down without a fight. 2 nights later, as Emily and I returned from the grocery store, headlights flared in our driveway. A black SUV idled there, engine rumbling. I froze. "Do you see that?" Before Emily could answer, Ezra stepped out. Even in the dark, his smirk was unmistakable. "You think you're clever, but you don't know who you're dealing with." Emily gripped my arm. "You need to leave, Ezra, right now." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "If you bring me down, you'll regret it. I don't care about court orders, cops, or lawyers. You're in my way, and people who get in my way don't last long." I pulled out my phone, hitting record. "Threats, Ezra? That's another charge." For the first time, his smirk faltered. His eyes flicked to the glowing screen, then back to me. Without another word, he slid back into the SUV and drove off into the night. By morning, I'd sent the recording to Ramirez. She didn't mince words. "That's enough to push for an arrest. We're moving fast on this." The news spread like wildfire. Half the neighborhood buzzed with whispers about Ezra's fraud. The other half clung to denial, convinced we were the villains. But when deputies arrived at Ezra's house with a warrant, sirens wailing, lights flashing, everyone watched. Curtains twitched, neighbors gathered on lawns, phones recorded every second. Ezra stood on his porch, arms crossed, his wife pale beside him. "This is ridiculous," he shouted as officers cuffed him. "You'll regret this, all of you." His words echoed through the street, but for the first time, they didn't sound powerful, they sounded desperate. That night, as Emily and I sat on the porch, the air felt lighter. For the first time in months, we could breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Ezra was cornered now, and desperate men don't go quietly. And if the look he gave me as they drove him away meant anything, the real fight hadn't even started yet. Ezra's arrest should have been the end. For a few brief days, Emily and I allowed ourselves to believe it was. We walked through our backyard again without looking over our shoulders, planted flowers in the garden, even sat on the swing set with a peace we hadn't felt in months. But deep down, I knew Ezra wouldn't go quietly. Men like him never do. And I was right. 2 weeks later, we were in court for the restraining order hearing. Ezra walked in wearing a sharp suit, his wrists free now that he'd posted bail. His lawyer carried a stack of papers, and his eyes burned with hatred when they landed on me. He smirked, as if to say, "This isn't over." The hearing was brief.
Jacob calmly presented the forged maps, the financial records, and the voicemail threat. The judge's expression hardened with each new piece of evidence. When Ezra's turn came, his lawyer sputtered, grasping at straws. "Mr. Thorne is a respected community leader. These allegations are nothing more than personal vendettas. My client—" "Enough!" the judge cut in. His gavel cracked down. Restraining order dismissed. In fact, given the evidence, I'm recommending immediate escalation to the district attorney's office. Mr. Thorne, you should prepare yourself. Ezra's face flushed crimson. For the first time, he looked rattled. But that was just the beginning. That night, our peace shattered. Emily and I woke to a loud crash. I bolted upright, heart racing. The sound of glass shattering came from downstairs. I grabbed the phone and whispered, "Call 911." We crept down the stairs. In the dim glow of the porch light, I saw him, Ezra, standing in our living room, shards of glass at his feet, his breath ragged. "You ruined me," he shouted, eyes wild. "My reputation, my career, everything. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Emily gasped, clinging to my arm. "Ezra, get out. The police are on their way." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think this is justice? You think you've won? No. You've taken everything from me, so I'll take everything from you." My blood turned cold. His hand twitched toward his jacket pocket. But before he could move further, red and blue lights flooded the yard. Sirens wailed. Officers stormed in through the front door, weapons drawn. "Hands up, Thorne, now!" Ezra froze. For a moment, I thought he might fight, but then his shoulders sagged. He raised his hands slowly, his face a mask of fury. They cuffed him right there in our living room, glass crunching under their boots. As they dragged him out, Ezra twisted his neck to glare at me. "This isn't over," he spat. "You hear me? You'll regret this." But his words carried no weight anymore. For the first time, he looked small, defeated. The weeks that followed were a blur. The district attorney formally charged Ezra with forgery, fraud, embezzlement, and now breaking and entering. Neighbors who had once whispered against us came forward with their own stories. Misused funds, silenced complaints, threats. Piece by piece, Ezra's empire crumbled. His wife quietly moved out of the neighborhood. His supporters on the HOA board resigned one by one. The sidewalk project was officially canceled. And finally, after months of fear, the fence line stood exactly where it always had. Ours. Untouched. One evening, Emily and I sat in the backyard. The garden bloomed again, butterflies drifting lazily in the warm air. "I still can't believe it's over," she said softly. I looked at the fence, the swing set, the patch of grass where this all began. We fought so hard for this little piece of land, but it was never just about the yard, was it? She shook her head. It was about standing up for ourselves, for what's right, about not letting someone like Ezra bully us into silence. I nodded, taking her hand. And we did it. We finally did it. Ezra Thorne's trial made headlines across the county. He was convicted on multiple counts, sentenced to years in prison. The man who once ruled the neighborhood with fear was reduced to a cautionary tale. And though I'll never forget the sleepless nights, the threats, the endless battles, every time I walk through our backyard now, I feel something stronger than fear. I feel pride. Because we stood our ground. Because justice, though slow, came. And because even against someone like Ezra Thorne, we won.